Hello and welcome to Correspondence, the show that brings you the best from our teams around the world. In this edition, we'll be bringing you stories from Iraqi Kurdistan, Lebanon and Niger, but we start by focusing on the COVID pandemic. It's been a year now since France went into its first national lockdown, a year in which people around the world have had to get used to face masks, social distancing and travel restrictions. Now, Brazil has been one of the hardest hit nations, critics of President Bolsonaro saying his approach has been heartless, and the country now onto its fourth health minister since the start of the pandemic. That as it battles another big surge in cases, and amongst medics there's anger and despair, as our correspondents Fanny Lothair and Lucinda Elliott discovered when they gained rare access to a COVID ward in hard-hit Sao Paulo.
Behind the doors of the resuscitation centre at São Paulo's University Hospital, it's a sad routine for the head of department, FLAVIA MACHADO. Is it a quieter day today?
There's not a single calm day. All of our patients are in a serious condition. We've never been in a situation like this.
She supervises 3 intensive care units here. All 45 beds are occupied. In this room, the patients who arrive are getting younger and younger, like Alexander, who has no medical history. He's been under respiratory assistance for 3 whole days.
He's a strong patient with no medical history going to the gym. So one wonders, where is this disease going to end?
A victim of the new Brazilian variant, more contagious, and which has sparked a massacre up and down the entire country. 2 people every minute die in Brazil as a result of Covid-19. These doctors, who are not ones to talk politics, have reached the end of the line.
A president who does not wear a mask is unacceptable. The use of masks is compulsory, and this should have been imposed by the authorities at the very start of the pandemic, and we should have ordered vaccines earlier. We should have had a better plan.
All the specialists screen each patient one by one, like this woman, who they thought had recovered a few days ago and who relapsed.
I didn't believe in the pandemic at first. Last year when it began, I was working for a lady who had Covid-19 and took care of her for 48 days without catching it. I didn't believe many people would die. I said, I will never catch it. And I got it.
Patients are recovering more and more slowly. As many as 4,000 Brazilians are in a critical condition, hoping for a precious place in the country's healthcare system. An impossible equation for this head of department.
This is the first aid group giving us updates on which patients need beds. I asked if there was a spot elsewhere, and if they say yes, I'll go back there for information. WhatsApp helps us a lot. Without it, we couldn't coordinate.
If no social isolation measures are adopted at a national level, these doctors warn in coming weeks, Brazil could reach the grim daily toll of 4,000 deaths.
Moving on now from a year of COVID to another grim milestone, 10 years of war in Syria. It's a conflict that's brought death, suffering and mass displacement. About 1.5 million people have fled to neighbouring Lebanon over the past decade. Our reporters Maisa Awa and James Andre headed to the north of the country, where they discovered a refugee camp with a difference.
In Arsal, an immense tarpaulin city shelters Lebanon's largest group of Syrian refugees. One of the camps is set aside, walled and gated.
There are no men here. We call it the widow and orphan camp. We live alone here. Our husbands are all with God.
These women prefer to remain discreet about how their husbands died. Some disappeared in Syrian prisons, others fought with militia. SOUAD arrived here in 2014 with 4 of her children. Her husband stayed in Syria. He is dead.
I only have 2 children left, a girl and a boy. I had 5. 1 was killed, 2 got married. My husband is dead. When I arrived here, we were a family of 7. All I have left is 2 children. It's awful.
These widows chose to regroup in this informal camp.
Visits are only allowed in the daytime. Men aren't allowed in the camp after 9 p.m. We are happy here. We do not want to live in a mixed camp.
The widows survive doing odd jobs. They get a UNHCR monthly allowance of 100,000 Lebanese pounds per person, currently around 10 euros. Not enough to make ends meet.
I'm in debt and I have to raise 4 orphans with no financial support. I have been here for 10 years, since the beginning of the conflict. Look at my son. He was 4 months old when his father died. We are all hoping for a miracle, but the truth is we are all going to die here waiting for a solution.
The school is closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. In these camps, children are forced to grow up quickly, especially girls.
We are going to marry Basma next year because of our tough situation. That is our daughter's destiny. Because we are refugees, they have no alternative. So it's all our daughters think about, and that's all we think about. At 14, 15, 16 years old, they must be living with their husbands.
Most of the women we have spoken to tell us they are ready to return to Syria, though they are afraid. And what they are hoping for is some form of international protection for themselves and their children.
Now, March saw the Pope make a historic visit to Iraq, a trip which highlighted the plight of the country's Christian minority. At the turn of the century, it numbered around 1.5 million people, but has now shrunk to under a third of that. Violence and sectarianism have seen many flee abroad, but some have sought refuge in the country's northern Kurdish region. This from Lucille Wasserman and Jack Hewson.
This church is one of several built in Ankara in recent years. Between 2014 and 2017, many Christians arrived here, fleeing persecution by the Islamic State group. Now the district has found ways to accommodate its new arrivals.
مسار التهجير احتجنا إلى أن نحتضن جميع الوافدين من المهجرين من الموصل ومن برطلة ومن المحافظات فقام العمل بسرعة يعني باقي الكنيسة.
Since the rout of the jihadists, most of Ankara's camps have closed, but many Christians have stayed, like this couple, originally from Karakosh. They live in a small apartment lent to them by a local family.
ما رجعنا إلى قرقوش بغداد لأنه ماكو أمان أولاً وثانياً بيتنا محروق وما عندنا مكان لا شغل لا شيء لذلك ما رجعنا إلى قرقوش. طبعاً هنا حرية أحسن من قرقوش.
A few years ago, Ankara was still just a village, but as the area grew with displaced people, it became a fully fledged district of Erbil. After the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003, the country sank into sectarian violence, often directed at Christians. The attack on Baghdad's cathedral in 2010 was one such example. Claimed by Al-Qaeda, this attack left more than 68 dead, including Artemis' son. Since then, this retired civil servant has lived with her sister in Erbil.
ما كنا متوقعين هيك يعني ظلم حيصير. كان فوق طاقة الإنسان يتحمله يعني إحنا حتى الناس المسلمة يعني.
During this period, many Christians left Iraq. Others often chose to move to the country's north.
المسيحيين المضطهدين في بغداد إذا يريدون من حقهم اللجوء إلى كردستان. نقل وظائفهم هناك ويعيشون يعني مثل ما يريدون.
During his visit, Pope Francis called on Christians to stay in Iraq and asked others settled abroad to return. Words of encouragement and hope at a time when Iraq's Christian exodus continues.
Finally, to the African nation of Niger. It's one of the poorest countries on earth and also has one of its highest birth rates, 7 children per woman on average. Now, economists say all of this is stunting economic growth and development. Our team of Cyril Payen, Amal Hamadawi and Catherine Clifford report from the capital Niamey on the imam who's trying to change mentalities.
Dawn is breaking in the Tellerjay district in the east of Niamey, but the Husseini family's home is already bustling. Here in Niger, the Husseinis are an average family of humble means. Their 9 children are getting ready to start the day.
We are very proud to have all these children. because it means that we have been faithful to the teachings of the Prophet.
Nafisa is the eldest daughter. At 17 years old, her dream is to become a midwife. But for now, she spends most of her time helping her mother at home. After dropping the children off at school, Nafisa has an unusual appointment at the local mosque.
I'm going because it's very important for me to be educated. An educated woman is a woman who lives in heaven on earth.
This imam is an outsider in the community because he speaks to women about sex.
You have to learn to organize your home. Family planning does not mean no more children at all. Population growth is a reality. We have to manage this reality in a reasonable way so that the country can breathe.
The religious leader's message comes from a progressive intention. Though this sets him apart from the community, young women are listening to him.
The Sheikh speaks the truth. The problem is that women are married at a very young age. And this creates so many problems in our families.
The country holds both the world record for birth rate, with an average of 7 children per woman, and the world's highest child marriage rate.
That's it for this edition. Our thanks to Armel Kaur for the camera work. Producing was Agnès Lecosec. We're going to leave you now with some images reflecting our times, 1 year of COVID, and some nations now bringing back restrictions in a bid to stem the flow.